This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon, here today with Adam, the Jock Strozinski, recording episode 477. And boy, it's going to be a fun one. The Detroit Lions got a victory, and boy, does everybody love a team that wins a football game. It was such a refreshing thing now to be able to break down a football game from the perspective of a winning team. You got to remember that last year, the Lions went well into the season before the first victory. So we're going to have an opportunity to break it all down. Hutchinson did well. Lots of good news to explore and break down. And then we'll kind of briefly touch on Michigan State shit in the bed out in Washington. We'll kind of gloss over that and then get to the big news about the Detroit Tigers, that they hired a new president of baseball operations. So a lot to get to, because it was fun to at least see the Detroit Lions, for that first half, go out there and kick a football team's ass. And I thought all the pent-up frustration that they had, all the week's work after the season-opening loss to the Eagles, you could tell that football team was inspired. And at least for 30 minutes, you saw what looked like a decent football team executing, firing on all cylinders, the offense, star players making great moves. It was a fun first half before some of the defensive breakdowns took over in the second half. But it doesn't matter how the game shakes out. We'll talk about all that. 1-1, the Detroit Lions sit after 2 weeks, and that's a really, really good feeling at this point.
I mean, really and truly, it was a great weekend of football. If you're a Michigan fan, you got to watch them beat up on Sisters of the Poor, basically a team that has leprosy and is totally anemic in all facets of football. You got to watch Michigan State completely wet the bed. That was wonderful and outstanding. And then you got to watch the Detroit Lions come in and actually take care of business. The first half, they looked like a legitimate football team. They were clicking on all cylinders. When I watched this game, I was impressed with how they handled the ball in all facets. Special teams looked good. Offense looked incredible. Defense looked good and came up with big stops. Fast forward to the second half. Offense is sputtering, defense making stops. Next thing you know, the team's getting punched in the face and the offense responds. It's what good football teams do. And dare I say, the Detroit Lions this past Sunday looked like a very, very good football team. Now, look, I get that they were going up against Washington, the Washington Foot Commanders, Washington State Commanders, Washington, whatever. They can't even get their own logos right. They're putting the wrong stuff on coffee mugs. Absolutely unreal. But they look like a very good, well-disciplined football team. Factor in that offense took care of business. That offense looks so efficient. And look, I think they left points on the field. You go back to that first half where they end up turning the ball over on downs on the 3-yard line. Like, that should have been an easy 7 that they came away with, and they left those on the field. This team put up 22 and a half, and there were still more that they could have got. And they looked efficient in all aspects. And the entire inside of that offensive line was basically backups. And they were able to run the ball effectively. They were able to gash and slash. The pass game was there, so they were able to stay in and pass protect. It looked like a well-oiled football machine. Not just a team, but a machine. I was thoroughly impressed by what I seen by the Detroit Lions. I thought it was absolutely great.
It was, man. It was great to see Jared Goff leading that offense, DeAndre Swift, even though he was dealing with an ankle injury. And what have you and I talked about for the better part of the entire run of this network? Build a football team where you potentially could withstand some injuries. I'm not going to lie. I had a good feeling before the game leading up to it, before learning about all the injuries, that the Lions pretty much matched up pretty well against Washington, just due to the fact Carson Wentz could turn the ball over. There's opportunities to get more pressure defensively, that the offense could do some things. But once the injuries started to creep up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, when you realize Amani Oruwariye is not going to play, 3 members of the interior of your offensive line are not going to be there, I'm not going to lie. I put out a prediction that said the Lions were going to win, but the anxiety level was very high. But to see replacements, reserves, go out there and not only perform, but perform at a good level that kept that offense rolling to score over 30 points. We've been begging for that for years. Build a system where other people can come in, young players, good players, older players, and still produce. Don't crap the bed. And so for that to take place was inspiring, and that's what a good football team looks like. I think what you're starting to see is foundational pieces emerge at all three levels of the game, offense, defense, and special teams, and you're starting to look at, okay, maybe this defense, even though it's going to take some time to build, there are some foundational pieces that maybe we can invest in regards to Jeff Okudah, Malcolm Rodriguez, and then obviously Aiden Hutchinson. It just left. Winning feels so good that you just start to look at things through a brighter lens. But the defense is starting, and we all know it's the weakness of the team, but the defense is starting to show some players that you can invest in. Am I right?
Yeah, no, I feel the same exact way. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as the week progresses and where he ends up on the injury report closer to Sunday when they take on Minnesota. But this was a guy who was chomping at the bit to get back into the game, a guy who wanted to be in there and wanted to play. Yeah, he was a little bit hurt. Yeah, he was a little bit banged up, but he wasn't looking to take plays off. You got to love that. On top of that, the 3 sacks, that was huge. He basically made up for what was a very minimal performance the prior week. Love to see that. You look at Malcolm Rodriguez. Malcolm Rodriguez is all over the place on this team. I don't think he's going to be a great player, but I think he's going to be a guy that this town is going to love, and he's going to be a piece that's going to be solid. I don't think he has the high end that a guy like Aiden Hutchinson has. Aiden Hutchinson has high-end capabilities and maybe elite. I don't think Malcolm Rodriguez is going to be elite, but I think he's going to be a very good football player. And he just swarms the ball. He has a nose for it. Anywhere the ball's at, he's in that area, and he's making plays. It's not like he's just there as the tackle's made. No, he's involved in making that play. He's involved in shifting the direction that ball is going, and whether it's funneling it to other guys or he's in there making the stop himself, he looks outstanding. And then you look at Jeff Okudah. Jeff Okudah 2 weeks in a row has me talking. Jeff Okudah 2 weeks in a row has gotten my attention. Jeff Okudah 2 weeks in a row has me eating crow and has me eating my words. I just hope it holds up. And that kind of leads me to what I need to see this Sunday when they take on Minnesota. Look, Minnesota is a very Jekyll and Hyde team. Minnesota last week looked outstanding when they blew up Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. Minnesota this past Monday looked like hot garbage. But they do have an elite player on their team. Justin Jefferson's an elite football player. That guy is great. He is exceptional. I want to see Jeff Okudah get the nod to lock up Justin Jefferson, and I want to see him take him out of the game. Look, I don't expect him to be able to shut down Justin Jefferson for the entire game. I don't think that he's going to shut out Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's not going to be able to make passes, but I want to see him impact Justin Jefferson's performance. I want to see him mitigate him, and I want to see him take him out of the game. Force Adam Thielen and Kirk Cousins to beat you. Force Dalvin Cook to beat you. Force somebody else to beat you. Don't let Justin Jefferson beat you, and have Jeff Okudah be that piece that can take him out. That's kind of what I need to see now in his progression, him going to that next level. Because, look, man, I don't know. You were kind of on it before the season started. You talked about Jeff Okudah. You said, look, he's making strides. He's making progress. He's looking better. He's looking good. And I just shit all over it. I said, you're out of your mind. This guy's trash. This guy's garbage. Has he arrived, or is there still more that we can garner from a guy like Jeff Okudah?
No, there's a lot to be intrigued by, a lot to be impressed with what Jeff Okudah does. And you look at a player that hasn't seen the field, it takes time to develop. You're learning a lot more. I think that he may have learned and benefited from not seeing the field last year, just by being in all the meetings and by learning and by observing. You maybe get a unique vantage point. The good thing is that he looks to be the part. Yeah, I mean, right away you're thrust into the number one CB role after Amani Oruwariye goes down. You're like, oh boy, this is going to be a problem, because the Washington Commanders wide receiving core is pretty decent. You seem
it's pretty deep, dude.
Yeah, they're pretty good. That offense is pretty good, and they were able to limit them for at least a full half. Now, of course, it's very tough in this day's NFL to shut everybody down. Now, has he arrived? Look, the tests are going to start. Minnesota Vikings, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, like you mentioned, that's going to be a nice test. So I want to see on the road where the conditions might be a little bit more challenging, how Jeff Okudah responds. I think that I think it's still premature to see to say he's arrived, but it's a blessing, and it's an opportunity to say, okay, through 2 games, he's done what he needs to do. Now he's got to continue to evolve. He's got to stay healthy, and he's got to avoid the cramps. That's really something where if you're not going to be on the field and take some plays off because of some hydration issues, you got to kind of take a look at that, because not only did it happen in week 2, it happened in week 1, and people asked about it, and he said he's going to have to get with the nutritionist and kind of figure out what the hell's going on here, because 2 weeks in a row, he's dealt with cramps. You can't have that happen, especially in a game that could be very, very tight. And we're going to talk about it and what we think about the game here in just a few minutes, but I'm definitely curious your thoughts on Aiden Hutchinson's 3 sacks, because you watch the film, yes, 2 of the sacks, kind of the play came to him. He didn't force it. The way it's described is the sack was funneled to him because of the way the defensive pressure shifted. But in the end, it doesn't matter how the sacks come. He earned 3 sacks, and he made an impact. And he dealt with the Charlie horse. Those things are painful. If you've ever experienced a Charlie horse, and I have, those things are extremely difficult to play through. Dude played through it, had a noticeable limp, missed some plays in the second half, but dude's a gamer. And I think that's a nice rebound for Aiden Hutchinson, who came out and said, hey, I don't think I played all that bad week 1, but I had more opportunities week 2. And that's what you want to see, 3 sacks. There were some people that predicted 3 sacks for the whole year. He got 3 sacks in 1 game. That's very, very much what you're looking for. Immediate impact. When there's an opportunity to take advantage of mismatches, you take it. And then, obviously the defense getting a safety was supreme, gave the team some momentum. I'm very impressed with what I saw Aiden Hutchinson in week 2.
Yeah, I think he played a great game. I thought he looked outstanding. This is the one thing that we all need as Lions fans, right? We need him to be a great football player. He's got to show up and he's got to impact the game. I don't necessarily care if the play moved to him or he moved the play and he made the play. The thing is, he made the play. As long as he's making the play, because how many times have we seen edge rushers or we've seen guys be able to make a sack or get there, but then come up short, completely either overrun it or completely just miss the tackle, miss the sack, miss whatever it was, and the plays go in the opposite direction. Instead of it being down 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage, it's now 6 yards past the line of scrimmage, and they're taking off towards the end zone. We see it happen too many times. He made the play. That's all you can ask for him, is just make the play. Do your job and make the play. For this team to take that next step forward, he needs to be exceptional. He was drafted number 2 overall. They invested a high resource in him, and they're counting on him. He has to be impactful. This game, he was impactful. He helped spur that defense and get them going. I think him paired with Jeff Okudah, who's taking those next steps forward, and if Amani Oruwariye can come back and play at the level that he played at last year. Last year, he solidified himself as this team's number 1 cornerback. If you pair him with Jeff Okudah and they're getting number 1 cornerback protection and coverage out of those 2 guys with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson up front, and you've got Malcolm Rodriguez stirring the pot in the middle, I think this defense all of a sudden looks way more formidable, looks much harder to crack, because you've got 2 lockdown corners who can basically take guys out. You can bring another guy up and stack the box if you have to. On top of that, you've got a crazy man in Aiden Hutchinson running wild and trying to tackle the quarterback. I think it makes you that much more of a feared defense, and I think it helps this team that much more. How much does this defense need a guy like Amani Oruwariye to come back and to pair with a guy like Jeff Okudah to really help strengthen that back end of that defense?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt, but you gotta kind of look at it and say, well, he's dealing with a back situation which can flare up at any given time. Amani's great because he had a propensity last year to secure an interception. Will Harris got one that's just very good. A player that has been converted from a safety. Many people down on him. To see him get a turnover was spectacular. But I think more importantly than the play of the secondary is the pressure that the defensive line forced with John Kaminsky, Charles Harris, Julian Okwara. when you have Aleem McNeil in the interior as well, I think that more importantly is the continued progression of that defensive line. That's what's going to make that defense better.
Don't you need to see more out of guys like McNeil?
What's that?
Don't you need to see more out of guys like McNeil?
Yeah, well, you got to look at, when you look at Moore, the run defense has steadily improved. It's not been perfect, but the ability to stop and limit the run is something that's on the radar, and Aleem McNeil is at the forefront of it. Michael Brockers, you're not going to get a whole heck of a lot more than veteran leadership. And remember, because it's only 2 weeks into the season, you now kind of have more tape to evolve. You now have competition that you can review on. Now you're going to see, because the Vikings, are going to try and take advantage of the play action and throwing the ball over the middle to see if the Lions can finally figure out a way to stop it. So we're going to see. We're going to get to see in the next couple games how the Detroit Lions respond to some success, and that's a good thing. But I do want to ask, because we have to highlight a spectacular aspect of this football team, because this offense started the year gaining so much traction. It's now on the verge of, if you can get another 30 points against the Vikings, you're now talking about an offense that's prolific. And what makes it better is the fact that when the team scores that many points, that many explosive plays, big runs, big passes, scoring points, no matter what happens, it's such an easier game to watch when you're seeing the football move. You're seeing, okay, Washington makes a comeback, boom, trick play or a surprise play to Amon-Ra St. Brown that goes for over 55 yards. To see that level of execution from, remember, a first-time offensive coordinator, and I think just like everybody else, you and I are probably in the same exact boat. This is a football team playing without a potential star player in Jamison Williams. Can you imagine if this offense is scoring 35 points plus a week, and you add a speedy guy that can potentially take the top off and can be so open that Jared Goff even can't miss him? I was so impressed with that offense. You just sit there going, whoa. We all thought it was going to be good, but not this good, not Chiefs, Rams, Bills good. That puts you in the conversation to win more games, where you can say, you know what, if we can just focus more on the offense, then we can just weather the shitstorm that is our defense. I'm all for playing 35-30 games, and let's see what happens, win or lose. It makes it for a much more enjoyable product.
Yeah, I was going to say, the one thing about that is it makes covering up for that defense that much easier, because look, we knew going into the season the defense was further away than the offense. All that being said, I don't think any of us expected the offense to be this good. Like, they're the number one scoring team in the league. And look, I know it's through 2 weeks, but they have looked impressive. And I think we can look at both games and say, yeah, they left a ton of points on the field. At least two touchdowns each game. So, like, that's crazy to me that they're able to score this many points almost at will. It has to change your look on this team. It has to change the way you're evaluating this team, because the offense being this good can sure make up for a lot of the lack of impact that the defense may have in certain games. It can help cover for that. All of a sudden, we're not looking at this team as possibly being able to draft in the top 5, maybe top 7. All of a sudden, you're looking at this team who now has an incredible offense, and if their defense can just be middle of the pack, this team can win the NFC North. Look, I know it's early. I know we're 2 weeks in, all right? But what you can take out of this offense being that good, and if it continues to be this good, and I think it's way too early to make these claims, but if it continues to be this good, you have to start to raise the bar and raise the expectations. This team is putting up points like the best team in the league right now. And if it can shade some of that defense and cover some of that defense, all of a sudden you've got a team that's going to contend for a playoff spot. They need to do it for a couple more weeks before we can really delve into talk like that. But if you're a Lions fan, you kind of need to look at that horizon and be like, well, does this bar have to be raised? Because going into the season, and everybody, I think, was thinking anywhere from 5 to 7, maybe 8 wins, right? 8 wins was a lot. But I think 5 to 7 wins, kind of where everybody was at. I think what Vegas had it at 6.5. So you're either over or under that. But I think that bar has to get elevated up to possibly a 9-win team, a team that's going to push for the playoffs, possibly a wild card spot. And I think that's great. I think the offense being this good helps alleviate a lot of the deficiencies that we have on the defense, right? We talk about how weak that linebacking core is. We can put Malcolm Rodriguez over all day long. That linebacking core is still pretty weak. You have an offense that's putting up 5 touchdowns a game. All of a sudden, that linebacking core doesn't look so soft, doesn't look so weak. You can kind of cover up some of those missed tackles, some impact that's not coming from the middle of that defense. You can kind of cover that up with the offense putting those points on the board. So I think the offense looking this good, 1, huge surprise. 2, incredibly pleasant of a surprise. Like, putting up 5 touchdowns a game is absolutely bonkers, man. I didn't expect that. I don't think you expected that. I think what it means, though, for this overall team is probably what's most important, because the offense being this good really does take off some of that pressure from that defense, and it can help cover up some of those inefficiencies that they have there.
Now, even Jared Goff will say it. He left some throws out there, is overthrowing some of the receivers, and the biggest thing that you can look at is, when things are going well, you look at that, but you also can critique things that can be better. The deep, explosive passing attack is not there yet. Some of it's DJ Chark's fault, who dropped an easy pass that was right in his wheelhouse.
I was going to say, when is he going to get involved in the game?
Yeah, he wasn't targeted all that often. No catches, no receptions, no yards, no stats, but he was targeted on a great play call. I think it was Craig Reynolds tossed it back to Goff, who then launched it into the end zone, and it hits him right in the breadbasket. That was on him. You got to make that play, and that might take time to develop that chemistry. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Goff have that chemistry, but I think Goff realizes it as well. When there are plays to be made, you got to be concerned when you look at next level. Next level, if you got Jameson Williams and he's a speedster that's supposed to take the top off the defense, you need a quarterback that's got the big enough arm to launch it. Now, there have been some overthrows, so that's a good sign that Goff is at least getting there. But how concerned are you with Goff's accuracy on the deep pass? He's making, obviously, all the intermediate throws. Him and Amon-Ra have supreme chemistry. You take that all day. The run game is solid. TJ Hockenson can do a little bit better, obviously, in securing the receptions. But the one area that has yet to click has been the explosive play.
I mean, it's great that they're getting all of this done without having that tool in the toolbox. That being said, that's part of those points that they're leaving on the field. That's part of the issue I have with this offense is it has to take that next step forward. Here's the deal. You played a Philadelphia Eagles team who we're not really sure how good they are. They look really, really good right now. They look like they're in line to possibly win a Super Bowl. It looks like it might be the Eagles and the Bills for the Super Bowl. It looks like this past Monday night was basically a showcase for both of those teams because they look really, really good. All right. In order to get into a slugfest with teams like that, you gotta connect on those passes. DJ Chark was the top free agent that was brought in this past season. He was brought in for that reason, to be able to take the top off of the defense. Jared Goff and him have to get on the same page sooner than later because you're going to need that in certain games. You could have used that in the game against Philadelphia. You didn't have it. You could have really separated yourself with Washington this past weekend, and you blew it. At some point, that has to come around. And you might need it this weekend because you got a guy like Justin Jefferson, when he's on and when Kirk Cousins doesn't have his head up his own ass, that offense is really, really good. And we've already highlighted the defense isn't great. We're looking for it to be middle of the pack. This was a defense that was bottom third in the league the last couple of seasons. All of a sudden, it feels like it's somewhere in the top half, which is great, but we know that it's not in the top 10. So you're still outside that window of really being elite and really impacting games. So what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to lean on that offense. And if a guy like DJ Chark can step up and a guy like Jared Goff can somehow get that chemistry almost overnight at this point, I think this offense looks that much more lethal. And then you factor in a guy like Jameson Williams, who's going to be coming, week 6, 7, maybe 8. He'll end up suiting up. You'll end up having him at some point. So you're going to have options down the field. Jared Goff has to get on the same page with those guys because then it helps elevate that offense and takes you to a whole other level, which really can then put this team over the top. I think it's important that they get on the same page, and I really think it's important that they get on the same page sooner than later. I could really see it benefiting this team this week, and I could see it being a difference this week.
Yeah, that you absolutely need to see it. Bro, the kudos that we all got to give to Amon-Ra St. Brown is crazy. This 4th-round pick setting records, 8 receptions and a touchdown in that many consecutive games. Are you kidding me right now? I mean, that is the height of reliability. My wife is through the roof drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown. She had a feeling that he was going to be the Yak King and that he was going to get a lot of receptions. In a PPR league, it's money. It's almost 20 points guaranteed on the board. So for him to be this kind of caliber of a player, it only bodes well. Remember, he's only in his 2nd year, and he's going to get better. He's going to continue to evolve. So while now the Lions are sitting at 1-1, I think this game this week is very important. You have an opportunity to go into Minnesota. I'll say this: if they do lose, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I got the Lions +7. Got that early on Monday. Hopefully that works out. But I think the opportunity to establish a game plan where you say, okay, we're not going to let Jefferson destroy us. We're going to find a way to bracket the coverage to his side, maybe a little double team action, whatever you got to do. But the Lions offense, if you can get, the opportunity to get the ball early again and have great success, then the opportunity will present itself to have an opportunity to be able to get out to a lead. And Kirk Cousins, for whatever reason, struggles in primetime, but the weeks after against the Lions always finds a way to take advantage of play action and make plays and find Thielen, finds his weapons. The Minnesota Vikings are going to be coming in pissed. They're going to be upset after that abysmal performance. But you got to remember, they're coming in on a shorter week. The Lions will be rested. The Lions will have the full opportunity to unleash what they need to. I like what the Lions are doing. I feel confident that if they can at least play at the level that they did in that first half, if you play at that level, if you can dial it up to that degree on the road, withstand some mistakes and get off to that fast start, then, oh my God, you can compete with anybody. There's only maybe a handful of teams that you walk into saying, well, we're never going to have a chance. So I love what I see this week. I think, in my mind, if the offense can keep it at a high level, keep this gear rolling, one or two potentially of the linemen could potentially come back. Amani Oruwariye, I'm liking the opportunity that the Lions have to go 2-1. It's not that big a deal if you lose, but it will go a long way to kind of establish how far into this rebuild are you, where you might start even be talking about, okay, maybe winning streaks, maybe getting a couple games above 500, because when you have an offense that explosive that can score 30 or more, you now change the whole tenor of a conversation in regards to your football team. I think that if you can bomb out Kirk Cousins and force him to throw that football out and you can bring it, you got to remember Aiden Hutchinson, Malcolm Rodriguez. You got the interior of the defensive line that can do some things. Charles Harris, we'll see about his injury that popped up that Dan Campbell talked about. But I'm liking what I'm seeing in regards to the Lions' potential to compete and even win against the Vikings this week.
Do you think that this team has to start fast in order to win this game? Does this offense have to come out and almost immediately put points on the board to kind of get themselves some breathing room? Because we know how impactful and how quick strike Minnesota's offense can be, especially if Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson are on the same page. Does the offense have to give the defense a little bit of breathing room?
Yeah, it's a very, very astute point. You got to score those points. You got to take advantage. Touchdowns, not field goals. I think that what is enlightening and what is refreshing is you kind of have a good feeling Ben Johnson is going to come up with a good game plan. Remember, because you thought that potentially the Lions could attempt to sleep on the lead and run the football with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. Nope, late in the game, they were firing the football all over the place. So I like that. That indicates that Johnson and Goff understand that this is a passing league. You got to move the chains. You got to move the football, and it's a league tailored to pass the football. So I'm intrigued by what the Lions can do. And when you say they have to get off to a fast start, what you like about this Lions team is they fight. They're willing to potentially get into a dogfight. So even if they don't get out to that fast start, I do believe that they can make adjustments and play well in the second half. So while it's ideal, obviously, A+ to kind of get out there and score touchdowns and get out to a good lead, this team has some potential fight in it where whatever happens, they're going to go down swinging And I think that's what a young football team can bring is the energy and the motivation to go out there and game in, game out, play in, play out, give the best effort to keep the games competitive. So I think it's a win for me. I think it's going to be something in the neighborhood of 30-27 Lions, and they're going to be very, very happy coming back home. I think it's going to be a solid effort from the Lions, and I hope that at least you get some horses back to have the opportunity to win, to at least get out to this is the division game. Set the look right now as we're recording this, the Lions are in first place by obviously technicality with some tie records, but hey, they're sitting in first place. Things are looking up, and it's fun to be able to talk about intricate breakdowns and looking at potentials here other than, being down and out regarding the Lions. So I think the Lions have a greater than 60% chance of winning. They're the better football team. Now it's just going to be about executing. Can they execute? And can they overcome a defense that just, it takes forever to build a defense in the NFL. It just takes forever. So at least you have an offense, and that makes it so that at least an opportunity to win the game.
I think this offense is going to have a bit of a challenge because I think Minnesota's defense is a lot better than what we've seen on Monday night. I think they have a couple of dogs on Minnesota's defense. That being said, I think this offense is so freaking explosive. I don't expect them to hang 5 touchdowns or more on this Minnesota defense, but I do expect them to put points up. I see the score a little bit different. I see it maybe a little bit further apart, but not by much. I think it's going to be 28-24 Lions, and I just think that there's so much firepower with this offense that they'll be able to put points on the board. And I think defensively, they'll be able to frustrate Kirk Cousins. So look, I expect Minnesota to come into this game pissed off. I expect them to want to basically rectify what took place this past Monday night. All that being said, I think Detroit has a game plan that will get underneath his skin and help unravel him. And I like what they've got as far as their secondary. Hopefully Amani Oruwariye comes back and he's healthy, he's able to play in this game, and hopefully he looks good. If not, you've got a couple of guys who can step in and really help fill in that role as a cornerback. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out. But I've got the Lions winning it. I got them winning by 4, 1 more point than you. I just don't think they have. I don't think they put up that as many points as you do. I just think it's a little bit of a closer game.
I hope so, man. It was fun, man. It really was fun. You realize that when you evaluate a football team from the perspective of the Lions, there's so much negativity around it. Reading power rankings with the Lions in top 15, seeing all the praise, seeing Jeff Okudah show up on Good Morning Football, Dan Campbell getting praised nationally, people talking and looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, and the breakdowns from Brian Baldinger just talking about how quality the Lions are, the ability to plug and play 3, not 1, cause 3 different offensive linemen. Dan Skipper's story, other than the thing that came out about potentially the kind of words he uses, we'll maybe wait on that to see how that evolves. But Dan Skipper being the practice squad player that gets an opportunity for the first time to start and to play well, a 6'9" guard, get the hell out of here. That's crazy. So you look at it and you say, Hank Fraley, kudos to you. You get a game ball for getting your offensive line ready to handle what they need to, and hopefully DeAndre Swift, we got to pay attention to his ankle injury. Lots of good news that we just spent 35 minutes talking about. But now we got to turn our attention to shit, because I tried to gloss over it, guys. Sparty Nation, I tried. When the news broke that Scott Harris got hired by the Tigers, I said, cuz I think it's a great idea to spend like another 30, 40 minutes and let's just bypass the Spartans. There's nothing really relevant there. And he's like, no, I don't think we can do that, because it was such...
You did try, too.
I tried. I'm not lying. I'm not sitting here trying to blow the Michigan State Spartans. But hey, when Mel Tucker, I give him credit for owning up. He says, I'm a horseshit football coach right now, that the last thing I put on tape was what that was. Yes, it was disheartening because the schedule worked out great. Saturday, you get home at 5 o'clock after a long week, and you're like, all right, let's see what this game is going to be about. And, and I think you and I are in the same boat when we put effort into anything and we say, okay, this is an issue. And then we target the issue and we put any sort of effort into trying to solve the issue. Typically, 99.9% of the time, you and I solve the issue. The Spartans and that secondary, you said, okay, just don't go out there and embarrass yourself. Mel Tucker's like, I got this. I'm taking over that secondary. Yes, they're dealing with injuries. Once you hear Jaden Reed's going to be there. But beyond the injuries, no excuses. The issue that you saw was a secondary that looked clueless. What is the point of defensive coverage where You bring your secondary back 8 yards on every play. I mean, you guys know that Penix is a guy that needs to get into rhythm quickly and can take advantage. That was your plan? That was the plan from the defensive coordinator, who obviously should be fired at this point. You realize that guy came up with a plan that had no chance of working. The thing that was most disheartening, give them credit for taking the game. Washington's a good team. They're well coached. The coaching staff has familiarity, obviously coming from Indiana. But what was most disheartening was a targeted issue just fell apart. The secondary looks no better, and the part that stinks the most is the coaching staff let these players down. You have to bring pressure. You have to at least try to have some press man coverage, not every play, but if you're just going to let Penix just run all over you and not have no answer, that is an embarrassing coaching preparation standpoint, and one in which it should have been targeted. So when that is the thing that you walk away from that football game from, you were out of the game pretty fast. You by the time Peyton Thorne came out for the second offensive drive, they were already down 16-0. So you had no chance. Jaden Reed being out really sucked. But for Michigan State, the question mark lies is, can Mel Tucker and the defensive coordinator, Mr. Scotty, can you put together a defensive game plan to overcome some of these injuries? And this is year 3 with Mel Tucker on a big contract. You can't target defensive backs that know how to cover and understand defensive schemes. That was the toughest thing to watch, especially with the fact that Washington knew that was it was like they had a bullseye on the secondary, and they came in ready to attack and pounce. And boy, if that's what they're going to do, Michigan will have a field day. Ohio State will have a field day. And you're not looking at 3 losses. You're looking at a football team that could potentially lose 4 games and have a really bad year. And I'm just disappointed because an emphasis was put on the secondary. When you put an emphasis on something and that's what you put out there, it's embarrassing and frustrating to a fan base that wants you to take steps forward, not colossal steps backwards.
Yeah, I think I was most blown away by a few things. There were a couple of things in this game that really shocked me. One, the offensive line wasn't able to stop anybody. You felt bad for Peyton Thorne because every time he would drop back, he would have 1, 2, 3, 4 guys in his face, and he couldn't get the ball off. He was trying to throw the ball downfield, trying to make something happen, and next thing you know, he's eating turf. Then if you look at the other side of the ball, defensively, Michigan's defensive line provided zero pressure. Didn't make Penix sweat at all. And then that gave him all the time in the world to throw the ball down the field. And I think you can learn something from this game with Michigan State. Like, you know now that the defensive line, the pressure from them, not good enough. The secondary, not good enough. These are all things that have to get corrected as you're going into Big Ten play. Offensive line has to hold up better, has to perform better. So I think you can take things out of this game and you can build on them if you're Michigan State. That's the one benefit that you have to going to Washington and losing, getting punched in the face and losing this game. But it was not, if you're a Michigan State fan, it was not fun to watch on Saturday night. I, as a Michigan fan, completely and thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought both the offensive and defensive lines looked like turnstiles, and I was surprised at how that secondary was completely
unbelievable. When you look at the defensive line, the defense, there was nothing. It was just tough, especially with what Michigan was able to do. I mean, did you learn anything, Cuz, from Michigan? I mean, you play UConn, and it's just the running game. Everything was flowing smoothly. I don't think you learned too much about what's going on from Michigan from what that was, right? Did you learn anything new this weekend from Michigan?
No. What are you going to take out of that? You beat up on Sisters of the Poor. You don't learn anything from this game. And I think that's the biggest frustration. You have 3 games where you played nobody, so you don't really know what you have. It'll be really interesting to see what happens this week when they take on Maryland.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you look at college football, maybe not this year, we won't benefit from it, but the expansion of the playoff will at least allow some teams to be more comfortable scheduling a level of opponent that is not so embarrassing, because it started off and it was non-competitive. Jim Mora obviously is taking over there, got a little bit of a relationship now with Coach Mora, but he's got to retool that whole thing, but it's embarrassing at the highest level. Before we get to baseball, did you see how Herm Edwards got done at Arizona State? I mean, I don't watch Eastern Michigan football all that much, but I have some friends, some close people in my church community that went there. And, dude, Eastern probably had the best sporting weekend outside of the Lions. They get $1.5 million to go to Arizona, and they go out there and they get the W. So all the alums are happy, and a video surfaces. Now, it officially wasn't the way it was exactly portrayed. Herman Edwards was fired on Sunday officially, but the video shows that he was talked to by the administrators, and so that is one dirty way to handle the dismissal of a coach that obviously has a storied history in the National Football League. To lose to Eastern Michigan is bad, but Coach Creighton has some cachet. He's done some things. I think that Arizona State, they did Herm Edwards a little dirty, especially like he's walking off and you see the way it goes down. He's sitting there, he nods his head, and he's like, okay, yep, it's done. And when people caught wind of that online, that was crazy.
I didn't see that video, but that is that's one interesting way to basically lose your job.
Yeah.
You know, you've seen head coaches basically go into a presser after a game and basically you know what's coming next. You know it's just a matter of waiting for it either on Monday or waiting for it on Sunday, but to basically come walking off the field and know instantly. I've not seen that video. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now because it's very fascinating to look at Eastern Michigan getting the W. Real interesting times with the top 10 college football. It's been fun, man. Lots of good games, lots of intrigue to see the way in which these teams are handling things. The transfer portal, the NIL has made it a little bit more competitively balanced, but there's still a heavy level of cupcakes. So the world of college football definitely can be improved, and it can be a situation in which it can be enhanced. So the evolution of the college football playoff will make it better. But, yeah, I can't wait to see how Michigan State and Michigan move forward. Michigan State's got a lot of work to do. Mel Tucker, good luck. Back to the drawing board with your whack-ass secondary. All right, last topic. Big news made just before we recorded, so that's great. We get to opine on it. My initial reaction was, it's been maybe 40, 50 games since I've really paid attention to the Tigers. I just don't care. There's nothing there. The stadium's empty. There's no juice. Things are happening. I don't care. But when they made the news of hiring Scott Harris, it's like, okay. But most of the time, I was kind of really looking forward to the hiring of the general manager, because that's the person that has the day-to-day kind of awareness of how the roster's going to look. But Scott Harris is a name that, you know, has started to emerge in baseball circles because of his work with the Dodgers, affiliation with some great teams, was a staffer with the Cubs when they won the World Series, has affiliation with Theo Epstein. So great. The Tigers have their big dog. They have their president of baseball operations. That's fine. I think that means more alignment. That means probably the further distancing of Chris Ilitch away from the baseball team. That's fine. He's young, 36 years old. It's just really tough because it was weird. I was like, okay, it's news, but I had no interest. My tweet at Detroit Podcast was, you know what? I know the Tigers are playing. I just don't care. They've beaten us down so much, over 30 games under 500, that the hiring of the president of baseball operation, it's interesting, it's unique, but I'm kind of more intrigued into who the general manager is going to be, who Scott Harris is going to tap into. But at least you now know that AJ Hinch has a prominent role in this organization. He's going to be part of the process. But at this point, cuz really my energy level for a complete overhaul, and it's going to take that. Scott Harris said on his press conference when he discussed things with Detroit media, he said he's going to make a lot of moves. And that indicates that, yeah, your roster's not that good. I just need like the offseason and to fast forward to March, April before my tank is recharged with this baseball team, because this season was terrible. But what was your initial reaction? Scott Harris from the Giants comes in and is hired to be the big dog. He oversees everything. He's the final end-all, be-all with the baseball team. He's the president of baseball operations.
So I'm very similar to you. You're just kind of checked out on the Detroit Tigers right now, not paying a whole ton of attention. As far as the hire goes, I like it. Young guy. He's an analytics guy. He's really into numbers. And he's from the Theo Epstein tree. Like when you go back to his previous stop before he was with the Giants, and you go to his stop with the Chicago Cubs, he was operating as the right-hand man of Theo Epstein. I really wanted Theo Epstein. I don't think Theo Epstein was looking for a general manager or a president of baseball operations job. I think he's got his sights set a little bit higher, and that might be the commissioner of baseball in a couple of years. I really like this hire because it comes from that family tree. I like the fact that he's a guy who has been a general manager and has conducted drafts. He's not basically a guy who you just kind of picked out of a bushel and you're like, all right, let's give this guy a shot. No, he's been there. He's done that. He's kind of got the track record here. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how he performs. Also, he's a younger guy. I think A.J. Hinch had a little bit of say in this. It's going to be really interesting to see how all of this is connected. Who's going to be the general manager? I think once they pick the general manager and we can draw a line to how A.J. Hinch and how you've got the general manager and how all this kind of wraps up with Scott Harris in the front office. Once we can kind of connect those dots, I think you'll get a little bit more excited. There'll be a little bit more juice here. I want to see this play out. I want to see what happens. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to give the Scott Harris hire a thumbs up, but I don't really know a whole ton about it yet because we don't have a general manager. So it's going to be interesting. I think that's the one piece that has to fall in place is he's got to hire that general manager. Once that's taken care of, I think Tiger fans, you can maybe rejoice then, depending on who they get.
Absolutely. So it's good. It's the beginning of the rebuild, step one. So when step one happens, you look at it and you say that there's an opportunity to reset what happened this year. It's just a bad taste in your mouth. I mean, this is not only was it a bad year, a big step backwards where everyone's like, man, who cares? It's like you got so many questions you got to answer. What are you going to do with Miggy? What are you going to do with Javi Baez and Greg Soto, who just are averse to the strike zone? Baez loves to swing at anything, and Soto decides at random times to just throw the ball anywhere near the plate. So it's just a big, huge mess, and it kind of just feels like a wasted year. Like we're already into September 20th, and a whole month and a half goes by, and there's nothing to talk about. It's crazy. Nothing other than, okay, they moved on from Al Avila, they reset the program, and now the building of the Detroit Tigers is going to start because it's going to take 4 or 5 years potentially to even get to the point of consistent playoff victories and maybe talking about player acquisition. You got to bring in players, you got to develop them. But I will say this. I think by the time March, April hits, we will feel a lot better because we will see that there's a couple pieces that you can start to look at as being foundational pieces in Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, if he gets his bat turned around. You have some young players in the pipeline that could develop, but there's going to be a complete overhaul in the development of these players. So there's more opportunity to get hope that this thing is turned in the right direction. Because not only do you got to bring the players in, sign them, but Javi Baez comes in and gets tremendously worse. You can't have that. So I'm hoping that a renewed passion with A.J. Hinch, Scott Harris, and the new Detroit Tigers GM that has yet to be hired, and with Chris Ilitch furthering himself away from the baseball team, we now can have an opportunity to rebuild the Detroit Tigers. Make sure, everybody, you go and follow Adam Strozinski on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you've agreed or disagreed with any of our takes, if you think the Lions, it's too soon to be jumping on the bandwagon, let us know. Hit us up at Detroit Podcast. Anywhere that you listen or find your favorite podcast, make sure you type in 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast. And then when our content finds you, all you got to do, push play, listen, enjoy every day content related to the Michigan Wolverines, to the Spartans, Tigers, Red Wings, Pistons. We talk it all, and we enjoy listening, and we enjoy being part of the Detroit sports community. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Podcasting time is coming to a close. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to firing up the microphone next week for the latest edition of Doc and Jock.